What's up, Mike Nostalgia? Dave here with a review of Ari Aster's Western, satirical, black comedy. This has a lot going on film Eddington, starring Joaquin Phoenix and Pedro Pascal. Also a bevy of other notable actors: Deirdre O'Connell, Emma Stone, Michael Ward, Austin Butler, Luke Grimes. This film, of course, is the fourth feature film from Ari Aster, who's one of the most exciting and celebrated and unique filmmakers of the current directing class at this point. Of course, his collaboration with A24 continues with this film, following Hereditary, Midsommar, and Beau is Afraid. Of course, reuniting with Joaquin Phoenix following Beau is Afraid, which was quite the expression of insular feelings from Ari, a film that had a lot to it as well, both good and bad. Eddington is certainly a much more conventional film than Beau is Afraid. Also a very big film with a lot to it, actual set pieces and action. This is a guy who's earning himself, bigger budgets and whatnot, more trust from A24. And following this film premiering at Cannes, it's now here. And of course, the logline with Eddington is the main reason why this film is polarizing and is certainly gonna have varying takes on it, is that Eddington takes place in May 2020. This is a film explicitly about the early days of the COVID pandemic and what it was like to be in that situation in this fictional town of Eddington, New Mexico. Ari Aster's Eddington is unsurprisingly a lot. When you're taking a film and setting it in the midst of the early days of COVID and making the themes of the movie explicitly about what it was like to be in that time in America, you're going to ruffle some feathers. And this is certainly a film that I think takes on a lot. Foregrounding COVID and the murder of George Floyd front and center in its story, its characters reacting to those events. This film has some grand aims, and there's a lot of things that it succeeds with and a lot of things it just does not give enough time to, does not treat with enough depth, despite being quite a long movie. Joaquin Phoenix gives a great performance as the sheriff who begins to kind of lose his grasp on what's important in life. It's a complicated movie, but I got to applaud it for the ambition that it's putting on display and making something so pointed and so explicitly about a very charged time. It takes a lot of guts. He certainly goes there with a lot of different threads. Now, if you look at the film, obviously there's so many characters, right? You have Joaquin Phoenix, who's Eddington Sheriff Joe Cross, and he eventually ends up running against the mayor of Eddington, Ted Garcia, played by Pedro Pascal, because Joe sees himself as a antidote to Garcia's enforcement of mask mandates. Of course, this is May 2020. Sees himself as, kind of speaking for the common man. And, it's a framing that's, very familiar and whatnot. And I think what's interesting about this movie is, our protagonist is Joe, and we're spending so much time with Joe as you see these various, kind of microaggressions affect his life, and all these things compound, right? The general pressure of COVID, his wife, played by Emma Stone's incredible susceptibility to QAnon and online conspiracy mongering, and her focus on that in lieu of maintaining any kind of relationship with him. All these things in the beginning, right? The general pressures of COVID and lockdown and things like that. And then you basically throw a grenade on the storytelling and where the characters are when, of course, George Floyd happens, in 2020, and Joe's presence as a police officer is also called into question, not to mention his feelings about COVID and everything, right? This movie's introducing a ton, right? You have Joe's colleagues at the force. There's two other, deputies, two other police officers, played by Luke Grimes, a white man, and Michael Ward, a black man. Unsurprisingly, Michael's identity as a black man and his identity as a black police officer is called out, right? This movie keeps adding on things, and it makes a point, I think, of showing things that feel very 2020, right? All the protests against police brutality and views on what to do about that and how to handle police department and funding of the police and things like that, right? There's a lot of things tackled on. I think if there's a criticism I have of the movie, right, because it's supposed to, and it's trying to highlight, what it was like to be an American back then, right, and our susceptibility to crumble and the humanity goes away, right? It's positioning, Joe as someone who doesn't really care about COVID, and that comes back to bite him when he gets COVID in the movie, right? And then you put that against Ted Garcia, someone who's, masking, but, not immune to the issues with masking and still gathering and the, not being completely COVID safe, but COVID safe enough. And, is there a middle ground there? Is there a performative aspect, right? A lot of things that are pretty familiar from our recent past, right? I think what I kind of struggled with part of this movie is like, as Joe descends into madness, basically, and gets very frantic, and there's just a lot of threads in the movie, right? That not all of them are paid off to the same degree, but despite all of that, like, you're never watching Joe as like a likable protagonist, especially once he commits some murders in the movie, right? But like, the movie doesn't really, I think, have nearly as pointed a comment of like Joe's side of things, right? Like, it makes kind of a mockery of all the people protesting, right? You have Ted Garcia's son, who's, kind of cozying up to Michael's ex-girlfriend. Was it Sarah? What was her name? Who's, very into the protesting, right? And like, it makes a point of like calling out the, white people, getting on the high horse and dying on the cross, if you want to view it in that lens, right? It makes a point of like trying to laugh at that, but it doesn't really laugh at like openly spreading COVID, which was killing lots of people at the time. Like, I feel like it almost yada is like the other side of the coin with this, and I guess that makes some sense because it's the Joe Cross POV for the movie, but as a result, I found a lot of it's like retrospective, like, see what happened to us type navel gazing. I feel like a lot of that was like kind of half baked. And again, you're watching Joe like make a fool of himself as he tries to, run for mayor with, horrible campaign tactics and using his police officer underlings to run his campaign and make his signs and stuff. And, like, doesn't paint Joe in a good light. And obviously, once you watch him commit completely unfounded murders, it kind of descends. But then you have the other side of things, right, where there's like an actual like instance of like Antifa violence as Eddington becomes a more national flashpoint, and we had this kind of wild Act 3 shootout that is very well filmed and really engaging, but I felt like had almost no narrative heft to it. Like, to me, the movie like runs out of gas a lot at the end. It's 2.5 hours long. Beau's Afraid was also quite long, but this one is like it has like 3 endings, has a coda after that big shootout, and the coda, I don't know how you're supposed to feel about it necessarily. Like, there's, I don't know. This is a movie that like I chuckled at. I appreciated what was being done. There are just some things that I just feel like could have been done with more depth. Like, you think about Emma Stone's role in the movie, Austin Butler's role in the movie. It's pretty thin. They're really ancillary characters in support of the Joe storytelling, and Austin Butler as this QAnon shaman type analog, I guess you could say. He's very good, very charismatic as a kind of, snake oil salesman, leader of troubled people type. Overall, I guess the movie's handling of like the racial dynamics going on, it's heavy-handed, to say the least. I just don't know if there's quite enough depth to it. Things really escalate for a while, and after you get to like second half of Act 2, it's just a ton of plot, right? So it's a messy film. It's a film with a lot of components. And again, I think it's ambitious. I think it's very well constructed. Pedro Pascal, the guy's everywhere, as we keep talking about, right? Fantastic Four First Steps, Eddington, Materialists, Last of Us Season 2, Gladiator 2 last fall. The guy has been in, was that 5 incredibly high-profile things in the last 8 or 9 months or so. This, though, like Materialist, is a supporting role from Pedro, which makes a lot more sense once you've seen all the things he's been in. This is not a lead role from him. And I think he's very charming and good as a politician that definitely has some confidence to him and is not without his own faults, as a father, as a mayor. But yeah, I think he's good as that. But at the end of the day, it's the Joaquin show. And yeah, I mean, Joaquin at this point, it's never bad, right? He just keeps hitting it out of the park. And even if he's in only like so-so movies or like B+ movies, you know, like a Come On or whatever, his performances are always great. And this is another great performance from him as Joaquin really kind of bears it all. There's a really fun callback to Beau is Afraid at the very end of this movie in the coda, which I won't spoil, but if you've seen that movie, once you see something at the end of this film, it'll remind you of Beau, which is fun. But yeah, I think Joaquin as Joe is, I think, really convincing as a kind of, you know, man of the people type who has a really kind of whataboutism focused line of thinking and kind of spiraling into spreading of, you know, lies about others, if you could call it that, and stuff as the campaign kind of descends. It's a lot to the performance as his character really, you know, grows. And yeah, this has been a really rambling review for me because I think it's kind of a rambling movie. Certainly worth seeing. I think overall it's more consistently effective and more, frankly, probably more thought-provoking than Beau is Afraid, because this movie has so many thoughts, and again, not all of them work to the same degree, but there's so much to this movie, and of course there's so much familiar to it because it's about current events, or, you know, recent events rather, that everyone knows well, you know, mainstream events and whatnot. So yeah, shout out Ari Aster, man. This movie's not gonna open big at all. This is gonna open in the single digits, mid-single digits. Not gonna make a ton of money, just like Beau. He made a good amount of money with Hereditary and Midsommar. Now these are 2 like movies for him, right? So I'll be curious like what Ari's next budget looks like. You know, the A24 seems very happy with this relationship. They didn't have to greenlight Eddington after Beau is Afraid made very little money, but they did because he's a great person to work with. You want to keep him in the stable. But yeah, who knows what he does next? But the guy is clearly going all over the place. I mean, this is effectively like a neo-Western. That's like the framing of this movie. We don't really get a lot of those. This one certainly is convincing as such. One thing I would have liked more of in this movie is more of the local Native Americans, the Pueblo. I would have liked more of the Pueblo, right? Eddington, the city, is uniquely positioned alongside, you know, native land, and there's different you know, laws and you know, rules about when things like crimes take place on the native land versus on, you know, normal American land, right? United States of America land. That, and then obviously there's the various Pueblo figures we meet, almost exclusively just the law enforcement. There was more there that I would have appreciated. You know, I think the movie at one point has a really great like cat and mouse element to it, as the crimes, the murders that happened, will Joe get away with them or not? And the Pueblo detective is starting to piece things together. Really liked how all that went. It's just a question, I think, of the movie's priorities, right? And like it starts to really kind of lose the plot a little bit as the plot gets out of control. So yeah, let me know, what did you think of Eddington? It's a movie that's going to have a wide range of reactions, and it's certainly a movie worth revisiting, worth thinking about, worth taking different approaches to, because it has that much to it. I'll be very curious to see how the discussion continues, though. Let me know what you thought. And for more movie reviews, subscribe. I'll see you next time.